Good afternoon to you, Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here. Sunday, the 3rd day of October now, 2021. And you've tuned into the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. Good to have you with me this fine Sunday afternoon. Got a few things to talk about. Nothing too pressing in the Atlantic Basin, but some stuff happening elsewhere. So let's start with that. This really interesting tweet here from Philippe that we're seeing a pretty rare tropical cyclone event occurring in the Gulf of Oman with Shaheen, something like that, formerly Gulab, however you say it, whatever you want to call it, that's what it is, a tropical cyclone. Yeah, same thing as a hurricane or a typhoon. In this area of the world, they just refer to them as cyclones or severe cyclones. And that one looks pretty healthy down there. You can see where Dubai is located, the annotation here added from Philippe. And then here is the tropical cyclone down in the Gulf. And just to give you some perspective as to what else is in that area, if I can get the thing to play some more. Let's just refresh it, doggone these GIF animations. There we go. So to give you some perspective, well, it's not going to play. There, whatever. There is the Strait of Hormuz. Here's the Persian Gulf up here. And this is the Gulf of Oman. This thing coming up out of the deep tropics and finding just this perfect sweet spot for it to develop. Lots of rising motion in this part of the world. We can kind of look at this from a different perspective here. Lots and lots of upward motion over this area with the standing wave. We've been talking about that all hurricane season long. And this is earlier in the year has been generating all the tropical wave activity across Africa. But recently a piece of energy was able to form in the Arabian Sea and make its way up here and sneak into the Gulf. And it's going to make landfall here near the UAE. A very, very rare occurrence indeed, so I thought I would point that out. You've probably seen this on Twitter from other folks as well. Kind of a rare thing. Very, very rare. So there you go. All right, in the Atlantic, we have Sam still out there, starting to weaken down to 100 miles per hour. But boy, as I'll show you the satellite picture in just a minute, it still looks mighty healthy for being so far north in latitude. I mean, it's not that far yet. It's only, what, 37.7? And it certainly has some warm water up here associated with parts of the Gulf Stream to work with, but it's going to run out of time before it gets out of that warm water. And then up in this part of the Atlantic, it's going to transition into a very interesting and powerful extratropical cyclone. Meanwhile, we have a system down here, only a 20% chance of development, got a surface trough. I'll show you that on the satellite animation in a moment as well. And then here would be Tropical Depression Victor, and nothing else at the 5-day outlook if we just expand things out. Nothing else to really worry about in the Atlantic Basin right now. And honestly, this I'm not too concerned with. Just a disturbance out there. And because it's close to the coastal waters and there are marine interests out there, you certainly want to keep an eye on this. Small craft, any shipping interest. You know, we've got the different ports. There's cruises going on now. And so, yes, these weather disturbances, whether or not they develop, they are important to keep an eye on, and then obviously especially if they develop. So we'll start with that. First, you can see this little trough of low pressure, an increase in convection, but nothing organized. Strong upper level winds cutting through that area, so I don't see much happening with it. You never know. You never say never. And again, that's why the outlook is there. National Hurricane Center down in Miami, they issue these outlooks for anywhere in the North Atlantic Basin over here and the Eastern Pacific. And it's not just for us landlubbers. Again, marine interest. They need to know about these things. So we'll see what happens with it. Not much computer model support at all, so don't be too concerned with it. There's Sam way up in the North Atlantic there. There's 40 degrees north latitude, and it'll cross that overnight tonight. And then it'll get caught up here in these westerlies and undergo quite the transition into a huge, powerful low-pressure system kind of dancing around and merging with other weather systems. I'll show you that in a moment as well. Here's the leftovers of Victor. Very strong upper level winds. This big tut carved out down here. Tropical upper tropospheric trough. And Saharan air all across the Atlantic. Even some Saharan air has worked its way over to the Virgin Islands. Brent was talking about that with us today privately. That, hey, you know, it's like his sinuses are acting up. Yuck. Saharan air in early October. But look, you can even see on this particular satellite image that push of more drier, stable air in here And while you can't see the Saharan air on this particular vantage point, it's there. Trust me, it is there. All right, so moving on to a close-up here from Weather Nerds of Sam. Still has a very well-developed eye. The core kind of protected. Some drier air starting to erode that central dense overcast a little bit, but it has gone a long way. And remember just how remarkable this has been. It started as an impulse. I talked about that upward motion over the Indian Ocean and then in the Arabian Sea area. All throughout the year, we've seen this big standing wave of just upward motion generating all this rising air and deep convection and these impulses. Once the spring and summer got going, this was one of those impulses. Moved off of Africa several weeks ago now, and it's a still full-blown tropical cyclone. Strong hurricane now, Category 2, way up there, getting to the far reaches of the North Atlantic here eventually, about to cross 40 north. Latitude, as I mentioned earlier, there's that latitude line there, and Sam will cross that later tonight on its way up into the North Atlantic. Now, the tweets and accolades and everything else related to Sam keep going. This is another tweet here from Tomer Berg. Fascinating stuff. Look at that cone and the forecast cone there. Isn't that unusual? Very unusual looking. So taking a quick moment, he says, to appreciate how unusual this forecast track and the cone of uncertainty is. He misspelled it, but that's okay. Typically, post-tropical cyclones merge with separate extratropical lows, separate. But in the case of Sam, it's going to interact with two of them, and while retaining its original surface low. So it's going to have these weird sort of dances, like I said, in the North Atlantic. And we can see that represented really well here in the GFS over the next few days. A couple things to point out. Watch the disturbance down here, if you want to call it that. That's the area that the Hurricane Center has outlined right now. There's the vorticity of Sam. Here is Victor out here. There's a little piece of energy that came off Africa recently as well. And you're also going to notice the lack of anything in this area just yet. I think that's coming later in the month, probably towards the last half of the month, and then into early November. And you say, well, that's a long way away. How can you even think that way? Well, I'll show you. I'll show you why I think it's going to be a while. And, well, I'll just prove it. We'll hold on in just a moment, and I'll show you. First, let's move this out into time, and look what Sam does up here. Pretty remarkable. You know, feast your eyes onto this area right here. Pretty neat what it does there, dancing around these features. Two of them right there, and then more energy comes down off of Newfoundland there, coming out of southeast Canada. Just a very active pattern way up north here. Lots of baroclinic energy in that region. And you notice too, this is way out at 156 hours. Maybe, just maybe, something tries to eventually come of that system off the Atlantic coast now. Let's just back it up and see where that all leads. And there's the surface trough. You can see a little bit of vorticity. It's strung out, though. You see that? It's all spread out. And, by the way, that's what that looks like on satellite, with everything strung out there. That makes sense. It's not bundled up. And it really doesn't try to do so until pretty late in the game. This is on out 3 days and then 4 days right there. Finally, maybe around day 5, 6, 7, somewhere. Maybe. Yeah, that's a long way out. We'll see. Could be some coastal showers, a few squalls, maybe some thunderstorm activity if you're out there on the Gulf Stream enjoying some warm water and some deep sea fishing or whatever. And again, the cruise ships, they're running from time to time. Some of them coming out of New Jersey and New York up here, running down towards Port Canaveral or maybe down to Miami. You know, you got to be careful of these things. You know, these weather systems are bigger. If it's a thunderstorm or bigger, it's bigger than us, right? So you got to pay attention. This is interesting. Where are we? Well, this is the Western Pacific. Haven't shown you this in a while, just to give you some bearings. There's Japan right there. This would be China, just to give you some reference. And here's the Philippines over here. All right, so why am I showing you this? Well, right now, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, the MJO, is setting up shop in the Western Pacific. It's been a long time since we've seen a real flurry of activity over there, but I think it's getting ready to kick into high gear with several tropical cyclones potentially developing. And after that happens, that MJO gets going there, it's going to move across the Pacific and eventually end up in the Atlantic Basin, the Western Caribbean, Southeast Gulf of Mexico in a couple of weeks. It's going to take some time. These are slow-moving, slow-propagating areas of energy and upward motion and other favorable parameters that they take time to move around the globe, but it's going to start over here. And just watching this circle that I've drawn over the next few days here, move this out into time, and same area of the atmosphere, 5,000 feet or so. 24 hours, not much. 48 hours, you start to get some action percolating west of the Philippines down there, just on the left side of my circle. Day 3, it strengthens and it heads on to the north. But look what happens by day 5. 3, count them, well-developed tropical cyclones out there. Lots of rising motion focused in this area. The water temperatures are always very warm out there, despite what happens elsewhere. It's called the Pacific Warm Pool, and it's almost always there. It's usually what happens east of that, out across the date line and points farther to the east towards South America through what we call the Niño regions, the INSO regions, where we focus our attention in terms of anomalies. But the Western Pacific, almost always, in fact, I can't remember that it's ever been below normal. You don't get La Nina that far west. That would pretty much screw up the global heat balance in a heat budget in a real hurry if we had cold anomalies like we see in the Central Pacific and the Eastern Pacific that far west. But anyway, what's going to happen over the next few days, week or so out, is several tropical systems develop there and dance around. You know, look at that, kind of doing that Fujiwara right here. These two around that common center, that axis right there, that's called the Fujiwara effect. See, a little bit anyway. They try to interact with each other. They don't gobble each other up. Some people speculate from time to time, what if two hurricanes, merge and you get a big super hurricane? Well, that doesn't work that way. Tropical cyclone-wise on our planet, yes, extratropical systems can absorb tropical systems, and you add that heat with the baroclinic forcing, and you can get super strong systems, kind of like what we saw with Sandy. And we see these extratropical systems form in the high latitudes. That's totally different. Down in the deep tropics, two tropical cyclones interacting with each other, they don't merge and, what was it, the Wonder Twins or something, where, da-da-da, whatever, and they make some super hurricane. Nope, usually one suffers at the expense of the other or whatever, and they both kind of suffer together because there's only so much available energy. So once this dies down, is my point, then we'll start watching more as this invisible, generally, area of energies just gradually moves across the Pacific and might even spur some activity off the coast of Mexico. You never know. But going out far into the time, you still don't see anything to speak of in the Atlantic. But at day 8, there's some of that activity starting to spill, at least on the GFS there, into the East Pac as it begins to sense this Madden-Julian oscillation coming over towards the Western Hemisphere after day 8 or so, and then maybe after that we start to see more activity in the Atlantic. But this is way out in time, something to watch for as we go forward. But at least for the week ahead, we may have an opportunity, once Sam and Victor are completely gone and the Hurricane Center is not issuing advisories on those anymore, that we will have anything on the map to track for the first time in a while. And that's fine with me. I've got plenty of projects to work on related to a documentary series and a bunch of other stuff. So, whatever. And if we get activity later in the month, well, I'll be well rested for it, as will you. All right? Have a great rest of your Sunday as always. Thanks for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. I appreciate it. Good to have you along. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. We'll talk about it all some more tomorrow.